in the right place. Welcome to the Nexl Business Development Workshop presented by Nexl. Today we're speaking with Ben Paul, the founder, principal of Business Development Ladder, and we're going to be talking all about the great reopening. The schedule for today is we're going to go through brief introductions just to get to know Ben a little bit better, as well as myself. We'll go into the business development reopening plan with Ben Paul and generally sort of set the stage, add some context, and really think about some very concrete things that lawyers and law firms can be doing. Finally, we're going to present Nexl's revenue acceleration flywheel, which is really Nexl's growth system for law firms. As you start your reopening plan, you're going to be learning and meeting a lot of new people. Nexl's revenue acceleration flywheel is the way that you can turn those relationships into revenue in a very predictable way. And we're going to show you what that model and that revenue flywheel looks like. And finally, we'll end with some comments and final questions, as well as a sneak preview of our next business development workshop. So let's go ahead and get started. Ben Paul, welcome very much. Why don't you kick off with a little bit of a background? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, why not? I'm obviously a Londoner who lives now here in Auckland. And back in May 2020, so there is a kind of nice COVID and pandemic story running through this whole thing today. I founded the BD Ladder, having previously been the marketing BD director at Kensington Swan and overseeing their rebrand to Denton's Kensington Swan. My career prior to the BD Ladder, I spent a decade or more in direct B2B sales, selling training to large corporates in London and across the globe. I then moved into coaching and helping various professional services firms and have worked with 2 law firms in an in-house capacity and had a real desire to take that further and just get on the consulting side, which is why I founded the BD Ladder in May 2020. We've since grown. We have a head of content marketing and we have an associate based in Sydney. So the demand's been strong, even though we started in difficult trading times. But look, it's been great. We can see that what we do really helps people progress, grow their revenue and feel confident they actually can get some practical steps in place so they can feel that they're enabled to actually understand business development better and go out and talk to their clients in a more meaningful and interactive way.
Yeah. So you are no stranger to speaking to Nexl. You are one of our business development experts inside the Business of Law hub, and we thank you again for being part of that community. So let's start with some general framing questions around the great reopening. So what does the market, you speak to law firms most days of the week. Your history has been in law firms sort of traditionally. What does the market, in particularly for legal services, kind of look like as we enter into 2022 from your vantage point?
Well, the good news for lawyers and legal firms is that it will remain very, very strong. And actually what we've seen through the pandemic, and probably not surprisingly, is in most areas of law, there's been a high demand. It's actually a really nice growth market. And what we're seeing is an uptick again in that corporate and M&A work. Even IPOs in the areas and the regions that do it. Across APAC, we're seeing a resurgence in that coming into place. So there's lots of positive work going out there, and it's really, really important. There's a massive, across APAC, infrastructure construction sector, which is seeing a huge uptick in work. There's government funding going into that space. So for lawyers, there's a lot of really good work with good contracts that's out there. But on the same side, in certain sectors, and it's really hard to be in tourism and hospitality and all that kind of things that we're aware of, we will no doubt see an increase in administration in those sectors. And that flows into a lot of work that has gone on, which will continue to go on in those disputes and employment law areas as well. And before this call started, we were talking about Portugal and some of the laws in there and how that's a field day for some employers. But, even talking about how shipping reopens up and delays in shipping and all those kind of things, there will be an area there. For the legal market, though themselves, there'll be it is a fluctuating market, and there is some uncertainty within their clients of how they're operating. So while there's a high demand, we'll probably see delays in payments coming through to law firms as well. So some of that cash flow might start to become more of an issue than it previously had. We'll see higher write-offs on piece of work as lawyers are doing the work, but clients can't quite face the bills and all that usual stuff that kind of kicks in. And look, there's some really exciting stuff with some new laws coming in here. So for unusually perhaps for New Zealand, we've kind of led the way in taking some of the planning constraints off development, because we really need to get building done. So something called MDRS is allowing developers to put 3-story sites up within the current footprint without having to go through the normal planning RMA procedures that we have in place, Resource Management Acts. So that's really going to have a huge impact in getting things going, but there'll be some uncertainty on that. Even though it makes it less legislation, there will still be a need to be guided for it for developers and construction companies to get the right stuff and make sure they don't fall foul of these kind of things. So that's kind of the market it is, but we've also seen a real increase, particularly in the latter half of this year, and we'll continue to see an increase in people investing in BD and marketing functions. Salaries have gone up, and they're actually catching up in New Zealand to where they are in Australia and Singapore and Hong Kong. They're not quite in the last two there, but they're certainly getting close to Australia. There's a real desire to get really good talent. There's high competition because there's not much out there. Immigration has had an effect over the last couple of years in this part of the world. So normally we have people from my part of the world coming in, offering their skills, trying to do these jobs. That option hasn't been there so much. There has thankfully been some returning Kiwis who filled that void, but it's been real competitive to get those people. But there's been a real desire to get those highly skilled people in, because as growth goes, firms are actually looking to quite rightly build and capitalize on some good business development and client lead roles, and also some more kind of digital marketing, social media marketing, people who can get that real lead generation and phone going. And going into 2022, they're the trends that we're actually going to see, the more kind of client facing business development roles, and those people who really actually aren't just going to put nice articles out there, but actually stuff that gets clients to interact, pick up the phone and email partners and start that business going in the right direction.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a very the first question was really about the state of the legal market. And I think what I heard is that as we reopen, what we've had is, and this is of course true across the world, even though neither one of us claim to be an expert as the on terms of the litigation, but the trend is obvious, which is there's been litigation legislation, as well as litigation that has sort of opened up. That, of course, the fact that change brings change is really creating a lot of opportunities. And what you started to talk about from the perspective of lawyers and law firms is that capturing those opportunities is really a function of business development and marketing to sort of capture this. When change happens, that always creates a new degree of opportunity. In fact, I think the Chinese symbol for change contains two parts, and the first is I think the first one is something I can't remember, and the second one is opportunity. So it's literally two things put together that is the symbol for change. So let's talk a little bit about business development and focusing your business development to capture so what has inevitably come out of sort of the reshuffling from the pandemic. So you started to talk about this client-centric sort of roles that can really capture the opportunity and bring it into the law firm. So what are you seeing from the perspective of law firms focusing, and where should they be to capture that change?
Yeah, I think the first thing is having a really focused mindset on what opportunities you actually want and which clients you really want. And we've seen this before in different markets. We've seen it here in the Christchurch rebuild, where engineers and lawyers were getting great work, but those that profited on the next 5 years are the ones that had the right clients and were doing the right kind of work. So while work can be flooding in, and it can seem like it's an amazing time to be in a law firm, it's the greatest time ever, if you're just being reactive and doing the work that comes to you, you're probably not actually going to set yourself up for 3 to 5 years. Because for want of a better term, most people in the right sectors, if they open up a law firm tomorrow, will probably start turning over reasonable money. But it doesn't mean in 3 years' time they'll still have a business. What those mid and high level law firms particularly will have to do in a very competitive space is actually look at those clients and those opportunities which will help them enhance their reputation and build relationships with the right people at the right levels to sustain them going forward.
Yes. So what you're talking about is moving from a reactive to a proactive, right? We know the opportunities are there, right? But which ones is now the opportunity, right? The opportunity is not that you'll get work, it's what kind of work that you want. Because one piece of work might sustain you for 1 year, while another piece of work might sustain you for 3 years. Is that generally simplifying down?
Absolutely right. And that's the point, getting on the front foot. And as you open up, there's a real chance to actually be at the head of the queue of those meetings as well. So if you don't have a capture plan in place, if you don't have that rigorous list, and I'm a big fan of lists of who you need to speak to, where the clear opportunities are, and where you're going to develop those clear relationships. And it should be person first, opportunity second, because it's the people who give out the work and the people you need to build relationships with for them to bring you the work. They're the people as the world starts opening up, you need to start thinking about how you're going to get in front of them. Can you get in front of them before your competitors? Because people are, and look, it's great fun being on Zoom today, but people are getting kind of over the Zoom meeting. There's a real coffee culture in this part of the world here in APAC, so there's a real desire to get back to that kind of face-to-face meeting, really leading the queue and getting there first, because that will lead to the second meeting, which will lead to the third meeting, which will allow you to build and develop those relationships. And hopefully actually you can win that work without having to go through the need for costly proposals and all that kind of horrible stuff and responding to RFPs. Because actually, where there was uncertainty, when we open up, there'll be certainty in the marketplace. So bigger businesses really start to drive on with their plans, and they'll drive on quicker than we imagine. The world is opening up. Once immigration issues potentially get unraveled and people can travel freely between jurisdictions, that will actually boost the economy. That will boost our construction sector here. That will boost some agricultural sectors over in this part of the world. It will have some massive impacts in a positive sense. Later on, we'll probably talk about the Great Resignation and what that might mean. But for now, if you look at it from that market perspective where you're going, it will be really, really, really good. Firms will continue to need to be more consultative and less technical. So a lot of the clients and companies and organizations people work with will have gone through massive traumas, be they organizational, be they revenue based, be they not being able to be in the same place. So they'll still want their advisors to be that kind of crutch, that person you can talk to and who will listen to you regardless. So someone who can really kind of be that nice listening ear. So they have to, again, it's going to be that kind of softly approach, really getting to understand people's drivers and what's important for them, where they see their business in years, and help them overcome those challenges, sharing network, really getting to the front of the queue on that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So let me try to play back to you and summarize what I heard. So, the first question was all about what is the state of the legal market. And I think we summarized it and said, there's opportunity. As the reopening comes up, there's going to be opportunity. However, lots of your clients are going to be in a place where they're not sure how to deal, and there's still a little bit of uncertainty as we walk back out of the cave. The second was, how should law firms focus their BD efforts? And you said, focusing toward the right opportunity. There's going to be lots of opportunities, but some opportunities provide you with 1 year of work. Some opportunities provide you with 3-5 years of work. And then you started to talk about how it pays right now to invest in a consultative sort of business development, especially with those targets that might produce 3, 5, 7 years worth of work moving forward. Correct. Okay, so the next question I think that we wanted to talk about is, okay, you have your, you know that opportunity is there. You've created your landscape, you've created your list, you know who the targets are, you know what you're going to do. You're going to have a consultative business development sort of role to develop these longer term plans, because getting work, getting 1 year of work or getting 5 years of work is equally hard, right? It's if you're in sales, it takes the same amount of work to sell $10,000 versus $100,000 of work sometimes, right? So might as well. But so let's talk a little bit about, you've gotten into it, but you haven't been explicit about it, which is what are the teams needed to sort of start to do? And this is what we want. How should law firms start to think about structuring those business development resources and those business development teams to go after and be proactive toward that work that is developing, and that we all can see as sort of the new pipeline of work coming out of the great reopening?
Yeah, and if they haven't already, and hopefully they have,
right,
the first thing to do is plan, and plan again. Right, get your structure in place. If you don't have key account management programs or capture teams in place, make sure they are. Make sure they aren't just BD and marketing teams, that they capture the fee as well. We touched upon a little bit in the last one around the Great Resignation, and this is where the plan's really, really interesting, because it's it's very nice to sometimes look at these things in isolation and think, well, these are just buzzwords. This is what the media is just talking about. But the trend is real. The trend is real. The Great Resignation is happening, right? Normally over here, we have what we call overseas experience, or people flying across, usually over to Europe or America and cutting their teeth. So we're actually going to see fee earners moving again. So whereas it's been quite static and relatively easier to get people within law, at least keep them for a long period, we might see a flux out. So when you're targeting a new client, that's going to need or an existing client that's of a reasonable revenue, that's going to require a reasonable amount of resource. If the Great Resignation hits and you don't have plans in place to backfill that some way within your fee earner base as well, that's going to be really, really key. So if you're a large or mid-tier firm, do you have relationships with those in smaller firms or boutique firms that can help you on a time that's required? Do you have relationships out there as well? You know, are you aware that client needs might shift? So if you're working with a legal firm of a bigger blue chip or someone with a legal firm, they might start asking you, which plays into the alternative legal provider's hand, but they might start asking a lot more secondments. Well, that has an impact, because again, you're going to lose your resource. You're going to see a lower revenue in what you're delivering there as well. So really pays to have those plans in place for what may happen in case of the Great Resignation. And that then also flows through to the BD and marketing team themselves, because at the moment it's been a high recruitment drive. There's been a desire to get in jobs. We're starting to see movement of people within the same industry and just going around the kind of swapping of chairs. But we might see it really hard to get resources, and a growing demand for even more and more BD and marketing resources. So if you haven't got relationships with good recruiters, and I would say recruiters who have contacts outside of APAC as well, because you're going to want to start bringing in, you need to reignite those ones as well. Do you have a list of the consultants that you want to work with that can fill in the areas that you need or you can see might be of concern? Because these areas are going to be really, really important. So from just that structure and resourcing, before we even get into the mechanics of how you're going to go out and go after, there's kind of a bigger plan in place, right? So it's on those leaders within those firms, be they the head of business development or the head of clients and markets, all the way down to those who are actually in charge of a key account program, to start thinking about this and working it through with their key account leaders and stuff. Because if you don't, you can get caught out, and then it comes to crunch time and the client knows and you know you don't have the resources in place to really put your best foot forward, and they won't be confident you deliver the work. But unfortunately, your competitors in the office next door, or the building next door, I should say, has, because they thought about this. So you really need to plan ahead more than ever. So you know that they're the really key points.
Let me ask you a question before we go to the next point. There was so much in there, and if the takeaway from me on your answer was you really need to map for the opportunity that you want, right? So we know that there's opportunities. You've advised us that capturing those opportunities will really be a matter of being proactive, right? To make sure you get the best opportunities. It's always like that little thing on this point, which is if you're applying for a job, the best ones are already gone. So, people don't apply for the best jobs.
Yeah.
Just as people don't apply for the best clients. So if you're waiting for those clients to come in, the best clients you didn't even see those opportunities, right? If you're waiting, then you're getting the bottom of the barrel, as it were. So you said, understanding the opportunities, being strategic about the opportunities that are coming in, moving from a sort of reactive to a proactive to make sure that you're taking advantage of those opportunities that are coming out. And then you advised really around making sure that you're planning today, starting to plan, and making sure that you have the resources that map to those opportunities. Is that pretty fair? That's a good summary. Yeah,
that's a really great summary now.
Yes, and I have a question though.
Yeah,
yes. And this is the question. Let's say that you've never built a business development team to really win sort of strategic type work. Now, at Nexl, we speak to law firms all day long, and what we're seeing is that people are starting to shuffle a little bit the character of their team, basically. There's obviously been a very big trend in terms of bringing real business development forward and client forward peeping into law firms. That trend has that's been the last 5-7 years. Can you talk a little bit? You started to talk a little bit about strategic account management. If you, Ben Paul, were assembling a business development team today to take advantage of that opportunity that you advised us is out there with the great reopening, and to be proactive about it, what would that team look like?
Great question, Ben. And look, one of the things to focus on is the personality and the attitude and the skill set of the person you're hiring for those roles to drive that change. Because what we're talking about is behavioural change. Mind shift and focus. So it goes back to something that's probably not been understood in law firms for about 2 decades, maybe longer, probably a lot longer, to be honest. I have a marketing person, I have BD, they're the same thing, aren't they, really?
Yeah, sure, of course. Yeah.
No, right? So if you go back to that point, you need the marketeers, right? You need the ones who provide the foundation, who get the message out, who build the credibility of the law firm, who do your social media and are in line with BD and help to build that lead generation and talk to the right markets. But your BD would have more of a market focus and understanding of client relationships. I'm a big fan, particularly if they're going to be client faces, they come from a sales background in some industry, and that would be a B2B sales background where they've handled sales management. And then those individuals are really key to get on board because they can work with the fee earners and the partners. It's important that even if you have a client-facing BD, the partners still need to talk to the clients, because ultimately that's going to be part of the most strongest relationship to drive that business forward. But they can act as, yes, this is the execution plan. This is how we're going to capture it. This is where we start. This is where we start with understanding who the important players are. This is who we need to talk to. These are the things that to them. This is stuff we need to share. This is the places we need to speak. Somebody see us as leaders in this field. As conferences open up, that will be a big activity going forward. This is where we need to have a direct one-to-one with them. This is where we need to provide them with some ahead of time ideas and information. And so they can actually drive the execution plan, but also coach the fee earners around what those kind of skills and conversations need to ask, how to manage the sales process, how to have a great client conversation that gets the client to open up and leads to a follow-up action, and a follow-up action from the client, not just from the firm. There's a great phrase, and it is actually borrowed from PwC, is at some point you need to have a billable event. And by that, I mean client commitment. If the client doesn't commit to anything, that process dies. The sales dies, there's no follow-up. So it's really important to have someone who can coach people to not do the, can I send you more information? Can I send you what we can do?
That's right.
What's the next steps?
Mm-hmm.
Get the client to commit to sending some information that you can then follow up and keep that conversation going. And it's a really different nuance habit to having those people in place. And they don't necessarily, and if you've got the big enough budget, they don't necessarily have to be the same person.
Yes, right, yes. Yeah. So I want to try something out. So your big point with this was understand that marketing and business development are fundamentally different. We like to say that marketing is how clients get to know you exist and like you. And business development is how they trust you, right? To eventually give you the piece of work. That's an oversimplified way, but basically they're fundamentally different, right? One's about knowing you exist and liking you, and the other one's about actually trusting you enough to give you the piece of work. And then the second point was, unfortunately, many lawyers are very good at doing the work, but not developing the trust so that they can actually do the work, right? It's two fundamentally different conversations that you're having. Is that sort of a fair assessment? And then the last was, I want to tie back in your reassessment, the resignation point, which is today finding that talent might be harder than ever because people are now doing hybrid work. They can work from almost any place. And many people are looking at their options and saying, if I could work anywhere, where's the biggest bang for my buck effectively, right?
Look, there's even some people who said, I've been cooped up for 2 years. I wanted to go traveling. I'm not going to work. I'm going to go off and see the world. Right. And good luck to them, right? So all these things will have an impact on what people do, and whether people choose to leave the profession and open up a yoga school or whatever it is they do. There's going to be a completely different focus in that area of how people go forward, right? And some of these areas we're looking there can be distinct projects. So that's again going back to the resources. Do you need a full-time resource, or do you just need that 6-month contractor, or do you need to just bring in a consultant to get people over the hump, to coach them through it, and then your internal team are more empowered and enabled to go forward? So if you're sitting there as a leader, it's kind of thinking about, how do you get in front? How do you line up those opportunities? And where are you missing across the firm, not just your own department, those skills and behavioural areas, so you can drive forward? Because you absolutely nailed it. Most lawyers are fantastic at client interaction. In fact, they score higher than most other professional services operatives about managing client relationships within a matter.
That's right, exactly. Within a matter, not outside of a matter. Yes, right.
So, and you can pat yourself on your back and think, great, I don't need any BD help and it's all done. But that's the issue, because when the matter stops, the reason to have the second conversation, the third conversation isn't there. Because all you can really do is go back to someone and say, do you have another matter? Which is pretty difficult because it's a bit of huge litigation. So you need to build a kind of bigger reason to have a conversation, a reason to understand their business, to be someone who can help them with their business outside of legal, outside of the law world, who's sharing context, sharing ideas, just getting them on top of things that are coming in. By all means, let them know the risks that are coming down the pipe. Lawyers have an immense amount of knowledge, and they don't share it often enough with clients, and they have it outside the law as well. So it's unpacking that super brain and finding a reason to share it in a relevant way with the client that means something to them and helps them drive forward. So unpacking that is a massive part of these activities going forward.
Yeah, we like to say that the best business development activity is not activity that helps your business, but helps your prospect's business. And I think that fundamental shift, if you're always thinking, what can I do to fundamentally make my client more money, even if it doesn't work for me, that's the best business development that you can do, right? And lawyers have a tremendous amount of industry insight, because it typically is the case that clients only know about their particular business, not the business within the context of their industry. Some do, but it's an overgeneralization. But so let's recap, and I think we're gonna go for another 10 minutes, and then we're gonna take some questions from Stephen and Fiona and Gabe and everybody else who's on the call very quickly. But before we go, we talked about the strategy, and now we're going to go into the tactical, specifically the new trends, and then we're going to go into the big $1 million question, which is, should I do human interaction? Do I do digital interaction? Or maybe, and of course, you're going to give us a perfect answer. It's going to be perfect. But let's summarize just before we get into the tactical. As we leave the strategic and get into the tactical, we know, if I could summarize, we know that there is opportunity moving forward. We want to be proactive and pick the opportunities and start to be proactive rather than reactive to actually garner those activities. Step number one is actually knowing what those activities are and where you want, and picking that. And then the second is building your team to actually take advantage of that opportunity and making sure that you're starting today for the great reopening sort of tomorrow. That's and a lot of that is going to be business development planning because those opportunities, it's not just about the work, it's about developing the trust to actually get the work and sort of the business development, whether or not that's an actual BD team that's doing that, or a BD team that's coaching lawyers, or lawyers sort of figuring out how to really start to bring those opportunities to them based on the opportunities that they wanted. So that's the strategy. Let's get into how we actually do it, and maybe some of the new trends that have come to start developing that in the business development and the marketing, which are separate, not the same.
Yeah, let's keep that point firm, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And look, one of the really easy or the most important things to think about is actually, and we touched upon it earlier, I think it was even before we started, the formal call, as it were. It's kind of the BD and marketing budget. And there's been a real positive that's happened during lockdown because travel and lunches have stopped.
Yeah, that's right.
Meaningless conference sponsorships have stopped. And I'm nothing against conference sponsorship if it's the right one, but you will see in law firms the rollover budget, which is frustration of many a head of BD and clients and markets. Partners will not get rid of certain activities because back in 1995, a piece of work came from that conference. So therefore they've been sponsored for the last 25 years or whatever it is. So that stopped because you couldn't do it. Even though budgets may have in real terms actually declined, in actual fact, in terms of positive work that we've done on social media, getting new resources, they actually sort of, in a weird way, potentially increased because less of it was tied up and there was more money for really good, skilled BD and marketing leaders to actually allocate to the areas that would have an impact on growth. So the important thing is to make sure that the board, the CEO, the managing partner are on board with the fact that, hang on, recognizing this, let's do this again. Let's go from budget zero and let's look at the activities we want to do and how we're going to do them right. And then worry about allocating the funds later and then making decisions and calls on that. And less of a partner-led budget, but more of a BD and central marketing, central firm leadership budget, which drives good behavior. That will help people succeed. In terms of those activities that come forward, it's going to be a real hybrid this year because face-to-face will be stronger than ever. If you look at research out of wonderful places like Hinge, they will show that if you want referral work, speaking at a conference is the best way to get it. And speaking at a conference, an industry-led conference around a wider topic issue that has legal aspects in it, but also a wider industry one, marking yourself out as a true thought leader, as a go-to. So those who can get themselves at the true speaking event, I don't mean sponsoring the coffee and doing a 5-minute thanks, we're glad to be here, but actually being on the stage and delivering that kind of sort of 40-minute or keynote speech or whatever it might be, we'll see a real upturn, right? So that face-to-face aspect will come in. There will be more traveling to meet clients in person because if the client's right, they will still need that. So that will need to come back in. So there'll be a real element of face-to-face. And while we're talking about hybrid, is actually there's been a lot of great work going on with video content, people sharing quick updates. So rather than here's a 40-page legal update, you want to pull your eyeballs out because no one's going to read that. Someone getting to camera and saying, hey, this update's happened, but what you really need to be aware of is X, Y, Z. That stuff's brilliant because it's all around personalization, making you appear as a human being that someone wants to interact with will lead to those. So the digital marketing, if you don't have a social media manager, get one, if particularly for the right size firms, anyone from the mid to higher up, absolutely need that skill set in there. And that personal branding will become more and more important because that idea that people buy from people will be stronger than ever. So leading the charge, having that as part of your marketing into BD plans, and then it gets into the whole social selling with a whole aim of getting face to face. So rather than trying to get the Zoom call, it will just change to get into that face to face. So those activities will be there, and we'll still see a rise in AI and automation. So if you aren't investing or at least aware of what's going on, someone needs to look at that. And the last part we didn't really kind of talk about earlier, but around pricing. There's going to be sensitivity around pricing, and we're seeing that in some of the surveys that are coming out there. Clients want certainty of price. So one of the growth trends that will continue to grow is that idea of a pricing strategist within your firm, or at least one you can talk to and engage with, because on the bigger matters or the bigger opportunities, you're going to find that it's not just a case of a fixed fee or this. There can be different options. There'll be success and upside and all this stuff that provides certainty, that allows you to still do the work in a great way and make profit, but gives the client more of what they're looking for and makes them easier to pick you in what will be a competitive market for those kind of right jobs. And tracking the data. It's quite easy. It's very easy to track data, and it's been a nice probably 2 years where things are all done online and CRMs magically whack it up into the cloud and your emails are all tracked. Suddenly people are going to start just having conversations face to face and speaking events, and suddenly that whole realm of non-digital and tracking gets hard. So how can you get those rules in place to track what's really important, keeping it simple, not overdoing the data you have, but enough so you can analyze it and track the trends, so your BD operatives can actually use that in a meaningful way, marketing can use it in a meaningful way and track those return on investments and know where they should be investing and know where the clients are engaging best.
Yeah, so that's going to lead us to our last question, which is where are you going to invest, or where are you advising firms to invest in human versus digital? And I'll let you get there. But again, to summarize, I think you tell me if I heard it correctly, again, we have these opportunities. We know we have to assemble the team. We know that we have to rethink our budget, because if we don't rethink our budget toward those new opportunities that we know we want to get, we know that we're going to miss them, right? We're going to be allocating budget to things, and we're going to miss the opportunities that we are actually going after. So that's, and I think what I heard you last say, which is going to get into it, it's almost the rise of the individual is still back, because the individual can now connect on LinkedIn, can be a thought leader across platforms, can speak in one-to-one ways that law firms cannot, and of course can sort of present the opportunity to do a human-to-human sale, which of course that's what people want as we come out of a very isolationist period. They're going to want human connection. So the rise of the individual, and those lawyers who can really, and those law firms that can really platform their lawyers to be the individuals that do the selling and build the relationships, will inevitably sort of win. Is that a good way to sort of summarize where we're at now?
Yeah, look, absolutely, and I think that's a really good summary. And there's a couple little trends that are coming in as well that teams need to be aware of. So before I get to the next section, I just want to these briefly. There's this whole idea around BD for good. So ESG and sustainability is a real thing, particularly if you're going for government, but actually for a lot of clients now. It's more than saying I've got a policy. If you're not actively showing across your firm that you're engaged in the community, that you're acting in a sustainable way, that you're providing to the clients and all those kind of things, it's a growing trend. If you haven't invested in it, start investing in it now. Show that you're part of the world that you live in. That's really, really important. And mental health as well will become a differentiating factor, or at least a factor in how people and questions that are asked in RFPs more and more. So in a hybrid working environment, how much strain are you putting on your people? Are you asking them to work more hours than that? Are they trying to juggle family and kids or flatting while trying to deliver the work that's high pressure and high work? So that having that shown and those clear stories in place will be really important in that part of talking to clients and demonstrating it. And actually, if you can share those with clients, they all also want that, because lots of your clients will also be bidding for work from similar organizations have that and stuff. So that trend also needs to be recognized and in there, because if it's ignored with all this race to get out there and cool data stuff, you're missing a couple of fundamental building blocks, which won't see you in a good place in 3 to 4 years' time.
Yes. Yes. And the best way to do D&I, mental health, and be advocates for ESG is, of course, through the individual, right? It's so well documented. People trust people, not brands, effectively, right? So get out from behind your brand and really, so that's the kind of rise of the individual, and the individual can connect in meaningful ways. I mean, if you're on LinkedIn, I'm sure you understand that LinkedIn actually prioritizes, like, for 3 to 1 any post from an individual versus a company, right? Because that's what people want, right? And LinkedIn doesn't care about your company. They care about keeping people on the platform. And if people want to see other people, then they're going to prioritize people's posting.
Yeah, so it's amazing, isn't it? Social media doesn't care about your company, but that's the platform where they take your advertising budget. So that's where you get right? And that's how they make their money, and we get the game.
Of course, yes, exactly. So let's come to the end. Before we jump into the last 10 minutes, I want to welcome Gabe and Julian and Chris and everybody else who's joined. With the last couple of minutes here, for your part, we're going to take a couple questions for anything that you've heard of Ben, and then we're going to dump into the revenue acceleration flywheel, which is the system that Nexl has developed to help you turn your relationships into revenue in a very predictable way through really, really focused business development efforts. So as 2022 opens up, the world has sort of come online and conscientious of the power of sort of online and digital communication. None of that is going away. If you had to allocate your time budget, which is the scarcest resource we all have, what does Ben Paul advise in terms of the breakdown of face-to-face versus digital moving forward?
As much in certain areas as 70-30 in favor of face-to-face. And certainly at least 60-40 in favor of face-to-face. Business is still done in human interaction. So the clue is there, right?
Right, sure.
However, digital and good use of data will help you get to face-to-face. So to ignore it at your peril. So that's why we'll possibly shift into that 60-40. But in certain areas where it's much more intense to get in face-to-face, and a lot of that will depend on your clients as well. So if your clients are of a demographic, shall we say, that really do want that face-to-face and that human interaction, prefer a phone, an email, that's how you get their attention, then you know that you need to get face-to-face. If they're more a client that actually responds on Messenger or all the other clever things out there and it's more digital, you might need less face-to-face time than you realise. But at some point, you still need that conversation. Doesn't need to be daily, but it might need to be at least every quarter. Because without that interaction, you're in danger of not really understanding them, because we all give away more of ourselves when we're in person because of our body language and who we are, and we bring more of our whole stuff, which is a lot harder on digital.
Well, it might not surprise you. I'm in my 30s, and I prefer to meet people in the metaverse, Ben. So I only meet people in the metaverse. So that's where I take all of my meetings moving forward. So
that's fantastic. You hang out with Ariana Grande. I'm very impressed.
Yes, all of it. This is it's the new frontier. I've already bought real estate in the metaverse, and you can buy real estate in the metaverse. Okay, so that concludes Ben's point here. We really appreciate it, Ben. I know that we said we were going to do 30 minutes, but the people wanted more. So I want to open it up to anybody who has a question for Ben. You can either write it in the chat if you prefer to, and I can ask it for you if you prefer to ask it anonymously, or you can go ahead and raise your hand, unmute yourself, and ask Ben any question. Any questions for Ben? We'll wait a couple minutes, see if anybody has a question. Stephen, yes, go ahead. I think you unmuted yourself.
Yes, hi, Ben and Ben. Super interesting chat. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. I was just having this question for Ben regarding sort of organizational design, if you wish, within law firms. You know, traditionally firms have like a marketing or BD committee, or they have one partner in charge of the function. Then they have like a team of executives, and then there's the practice groups with their leadership. In light of the big trends you've so aptly described around the importance of the individual, getting in front of your brand, if you wish, and that kind of decentralization, how should firms rethink the way they organize themselves, sort of from an organization perspective, to meet these challenges? Any thoughts on that?
I would love to see firms, and I've seen it in other professional service industries, even if it's not on a daily basis. If you start thinking about hybrid working, if at least one day a week you went into client teams or sector teams and they became cross line of service, included the BD, administration, marketing support, HR as required, all in one place, thinking about that client or sector and working together for a day, you're going to get some real gold, because actually that's where the ideas and innovation will come. You're going to all share ideas. You're going to be thinking about that sector and that client. You're going to be just doing your day-to-day work, and that kind of water cooler conversation will come in, rather than just getting in as it happens and having that sort of formal 30-minute in conversation where you're forced to think and that. But that regular, once every week or once every fortnight, people getting into client groups and teams, way more powerful. It would be great to see a world where people sit in that way permanently, cross line of service. But there's some other sides around how law is delivered and the learning of juniors that sometimes, perhaps, I'm told, prevent that kind of way of working. But it'd be fantastic to see that, and the development people will have in a wider business learning as well as law would be fantastic from the ground up. And I think the sooner you get the next generation involved in business development and marketing activities, the sooner they understand it, the sooner they become just au fait with it and really good at client conversations. So yeah, I think that's a really good way to build that structure going forward.
Brilliant. Thanks so much.
Thank you for the question, Stephen. So if nobody else has any questions, we'll go ahead and get into the last couple of minutes here. We really appreciate everybody being on the call. And I'm going to go ahead and present the Nexl Revenue Flywheel, which, if you've seen, has been behind me the entire presentation. So at Nexl, if you're unfamiliar with Nexl, Nexl is the #1 client revenue platform for law firms. And we help law firms turn their relationships into revenue. Lots of lawyers have relationships with lots of people around the world. Where they get stuck is really turning those relationships into revenue in a predictable way. And the client revenue flywheel, which is behind us, is really just a 3-step system that anybody can use to turn those relationships into revenue by either expanding your current client relationships, growing or acquiring new clients, and finally retaining your current clients for longer through things like strategic client development. And I'll go ahead and just present very briefly how we can actually do that. So if you go to nexlcrm.com, you'll see the client revenue flywheel here. And Nexl is the #1 client revenue platform. So we have taken this strategy, this 3-step strategy, and we have created an entire software platform that allows you to do each one of these business development motions, be it if you want to acquire new clients, retain your current clients longer, or even expand your current clients into more work. And I'll just go through a couple very brief ways. So let's say, for example, that you wanted to prospect and find new clients. You heard Ben Paul today talk a lot about knowing what are the opportunities that you wanted to look for. Nexl has a built-in client prospecting tool that every single lawyer can use to really come in and find the prospects type of opportunities that they were looking for. So let's say, for example, that you were looking for, let's say that you were looking to tap into biotechnology, clients that are over 200 to 500 people biotechnology. Within Nexl, you'll see an immediate list of all of the companies within the United States that are biotechnology companies with between 51 to 200 people. By adding them to your prospect list, you can then go into that account, and you'll see that they were, I believe that they were, if I'm not mistaken, let's see. Well, here's I actually can't find them now. Let's see, if we refresh here. Let's see very quickly. Okay, so we'll take this as the example. If we walk into this prospect, you will very quickly see a list of all, and this will bring up. You'll see all of the different people who work at this particular prospect right inside Nexl. From there, you'll be able to very quickly see who you could be reaching out to. Let's say, for example, however, that you wanted to instead retain and reach out to some of your clients and keep them top of mind and continuously come back to them. Nexl automatically is a no data entry client relationship management platform that automatically captures everybody that you've had a meeting with or sent an email to. And just like that, you'll see a list of everybody that you have emailed, as well as the last time that you've engaged with them, the last interaction that you had, the number of contacts that you have. And if you would click into any specific account, you could quickly see how well are you speaking with your clients on an average day-to-day basis. So instead of you having to remember when the last time is, you can easily see or even set a reminder to follow up with one of those specific contacts. This is how Nexl really helps you retain your clients for much, much longer. And then finally, let's assume that you wanted to expand some of your client accounts. Expansion is one of the easiest ways to increase revenue into any particular client account. And Nexl makes it very, very easy for you to see who else your law firm could be doing work for. So let's say, for example, that you were only speaking to 3 people within a certain account. You might want to expand that account and introduce those prospects. Nexl again shows you where you can expand that account in a very, very easy way, and even create new projects to allow you to go in and start to expand those accounts where you can work with your entire team to refer different clients and make introductions to one another, again, expanding that. There's so much more powerful work that you can do in Nexl, but we want to respect your time, and we're coming to the end. If you would like to see a demo, a 25-minute demo of Nexl, simply go to nexlcrm.com/book-demo. On that demo, we will walk with you step by step. We will learn a little bit about your law firm. We will discuss along the lines of what Ben has suggested when it comes to planning and the type of opportunities. Then we'll show you how Nexl can help you go after those particular opportunities that you would be looking to capture whenever the great reopening is starting to happen, and the step-by-step ways that we can help you actually accomplish that. And then, what next steps would be. Nexl speaks to law firms all around the world, and we have really started to understand the best practices about how the best law firms in the world are really starting to go from reactive to proactive business development and capture those opportunities. But that's it. And we're going to go ahead and close out today. Ben, Paul, thank you so much, founder of Business Development Ladder. Any final words for everybody on the call today?
No, just big thanks to yourself, Ben, and Nexl as always. It's been great chatting to everyone and answering a few questions and putting the glasses, which I've now taken off, but I was enwrapped by your presentation there.
Yes.
The glasses on the future and just seeing what 2022 holds. And the main thing I would say, it's a really exciting time to be in law. It's a really exciting time to be in and around business development in law and working with law firms. You know, and with products like yours and capturing that data and aligning it to plan, those that do it will be really, really successful for the next 5-10 years, which is a great place to be.
It is, yes. All things are hard, might as well go after the biggest opportunities. And there are certainly huge opportunities that are going to go someplace in the reopening. And Nexl and Ben, we want to help your law firm make sure that you capture those big opportunities that you know are happening and that we all can feel are happening right now. So start planning today. Reach out to Ben to talk strategy, reach out to Nexl CRM to have the power to really sort of do these things at scale. Thanks so much, Ben, Paul. We'll see you on another business development workshop next week. Tune in, you'll see it on social. Follow us for all the updates and everything else. Thanks so much, Ben.
Awesome, thanks, Ben.
So yeah, take care, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.